car now for closing his park.
Where?
Canine ID or set.
Okay.
Cut.
George Stephanopoulos.
9:30 now in the East, and we can project two more states now for President Trump. Donald Trump will win the state of Alabama. He will put 10% of the vote in. Of course, that is a strong Republican state. Big Senate race there as well. Republicans hoping to pick up a Senate seat there. Tommy Tuberville over Doug Jones. We don't have a projection on that yet, but we can say that Donald Trump will also win the state of North Dakota tonight. So he's picked up two more states there for the president. We see 89 electoral votes for Joe Biden, 63 for Donald Trump right now. And right now, let's pull up the state of Virginia. Take a look at what we're seeing now in the state of Virginia. 41% of the expected vote in. Right now, Tom Yamas, we're still seeing Donald Trump with a large lead, but only 41% of the expected vote in.
Yeah, George, it's a little strange. This is kind of interesting right now in Virginia. As you know, Democrats have been winning this state. Let's blow it up here. A lot of these red counties, the rural counties, as you go further west, you're going to get into coal country. But I want to blow this up here. This is the Democratic suburbs around D.C., this area right here. You have Alexandria, Fairfax, Arlington. These are areas where Democrats need to run up the score, and that's how they end up winning the state. Places like Fairfax, it's actually pretty close when you look at 4 years ago. Joe Biden's underperforming, and that's why I say the numbers are a little strange right now in Virginia. Prince William County, here's another thing. It's neck and neck. This was a county that Clinton clearly won 4 years ago. So it's sort of interesting when we look. I was trying to see if this was part of the early vote. Maybe Republicans came out to vote early there. Unfortunately, right now, all we have is that 57% of the vote is going to be early vote. We don't see who's on top right now, George.
Okay, Tom Yamas, thanks very much. Let's bring in Senator Tim Kaine. Tim, we were just hearing from Tom Yamas, so it shows we don't have a lot of the vote in. I take it you're feeling a bit more confident about your state?
5.
Yeah, George, the AP called Virginia at 736 because of the early vote totals are so strongly Democratic. About 70% of the 2016 total got cast early, and we know who those voters are. Just by way of comparison, the AP called Virginia at 11 o'clock in 2008, at 1 a.m. in 2012, and at 10:30 in 2016. So calling Virginia 3 hours earlier suggests very, very strong night in Virginia. Mark Warner's won big. We feel good about our congressional races. And because Virginia is now heavily suburban, we think that also probably bodes well for suburbs in places like North Carolina, Georgia, Philly, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and the upper Midwest. So we feel really good in Virginia. We hope it sends a message and is an indicator elsewhere.
Of course, you were part of the Hillary Clinton campaign 4 years ago. What feels different to you this time around?
I mean, the tremendous surge of early vote. I mean, that shows not only people taking and, trying to protect themselves from COVID, but it also shows intense energy. And George, as you know, we know who the early voters are. We don't know how they voted, but if a Tim Kaine votes early, we can see, well, Tim Kaine has only voted ever in Democratic primaries. That's a Democratic vote. And we're seeing this really strong early vote in many states that gets often reported a little bit later, even if it comes in early. Early vote is strong. The early vote is disproportionately young people compared to 4 years ago. And then states that are battlegrounds that never have been, Georgia, Arizona, Texas, for gosh sake. We are competitive in states where it's very, very tough.
So you're feeling good about the whole night, not just your state?
Yes, absolutely.
Senator Kaine, thanks very much for your time tonight. We can project now the state of South Carolina is going to go to Donald Trump. South Carolina, strong red state. Donald Trump won it 4 years ago. He is going to win it again tonight. Janae Norman is in South Carolina.
Yeah, hey, George, we expected this. This is a state that hasn't voted for a Democrat for president since 1976. President Trump's support has remained steady, and exit polls showing that the president approval rating is about 55%. But one thing that we're watching big here is, of course, the Senate race here. It is a fierce battle, and Republicans are on defense. Few places is that more true than here in South Carolina. Think about this. Lindsey Graham, he is a household name, a 17-year incumbent in a Republican stronghold. He was expected to easily win re-election a few months ago, but now he is in the fight of his political life. He has been on TV, forced to essentially beg for donations to try to beat Jamie Harrison. Jamie Harrison at one point raised more than $57 million in just over 3 months. He is one of those candidates that Democrats are hoping can help them flip some red seats blue. So that is what we're watching tonight here, George.
Okay, Janae, thanks very much. We can't project that yet, but you just heard that chime. That means we can project that in Colorado, the Senate race in Colorado, former Governor John Hickenlooper is going to defeat Cory Gardner, the incumbent Republican senator. So that is a pickup for the Democrats tonight in the Senate. John Hickenlooper has defeated Cory Gardner, John Karl. Magic numbers in the Senate: 3 if Biden wins for the Democrats, 4 if he doesn't.
Yeah, and this was probably their top target to pick up. Cory Gardner tied himself quite closely to Donald Trump, actually tried to avoid comment whenever there was anything controversial. Hickenlooper, the former governor, of course, briefly ran for president, recruited to run for this seat. No surprise that this is the first pickup. They've got to pick up a few more.
Matt Gutman?
Just adding to what John was saying, Hickenlooper, two-time mayor, two-time governor of the state, beloved. He ran for president briefly, then decided to run for Senate. This is not a surprise, but as Janae was saying, this is a key state that the Democrats wanted to pick up to turn from red to blue. And frankly, this is a purple state that is leaning blue, George. And Cory Gardner didn't have much of a chance. He voted towards the GOP in the Senate 89% of the time in a state that we were saying is purple, leaning blue. It was unlikely that he was going to win this. The polls had favored Hickenlooper all along. But this is one state, possibly another in the Rocky Mountain region, Montana, that could flip from red to blue tonight. George.
Matt Gutman, thanks very much. Mary Bruce, your day job is covering Capitol Hill, and I wanted you to pick up on what John Karl was just talking about there. Cory Gardner, one of those senators who, whenever President Trump got in a little bit of trouble, he disappeared.
Yeah, it was amazing how all of a sudden Cory Gardner would become very hard to find in the halls of the Capitol in those moments. Look, as John was saying, he was viewed as the most vulnerable Republican tonight. There are several others that Democrats are keeping a close eye on. And I have to say, George, Republicans know that there is a very real risk that they could lose their Senate majority tonight. In addition to Colorado, which we now know the result in, they're keeping a very close eye on Arizona. They feel very strongly, Democrats do, that they have a chance to defeat Martha McSally in that race. They're also feeling optimistic about possibly possibly Iowa, Maine, and North Carolina. The Senate race in Georgia is now looming as a very real possibility, with actually 2 races there tonight, and both Republican senators at risk there. Democrats concede that they are likely to lose a seat in Alabama, Doug Jones's seat. That means if you go back to the math here, if they lose that seat, they would then need to pick up 4 seats. Democrats would if Joe Biden wins, because in that instance, Kamala Harris would then become the tiebreaker as vice president. If Donald Trump wins, that means the Democrats would then have to pick up 5 seats if they do lose that race in Alabama.
Mary Bruce, thanks very much. Let's take a deeper dive now at the state of Pennsylvania. We've been calling that the most critical battleground of the night tonight. 19% of the expected vote is in right now. Joe Biden has a large lead. And Tom, why don't you try to run through some of the key counties in Pennsylvania that we're going to be watching tonight?
George, we were just looking at Pennsylvania a little closely, and the numbers are really all over the place. There's not really a narrative we can really talk about at this point. Look, for instance, I'll give you Scranton right here. Lackawanna. Donald Trump is on top in Joe Biden's hometown, and he's overperforming there for Republicans. We go just south, Lucerne County. This is Wilkes-Barre. This is a swing county that Donald Trump won 4 years ago. Tonight, Joe Biden's on top. But again, only 29% of the vote in. On the big cities where Democrats really have to win, Allegheny, Pittsburgh, you can see how high Joe Biden's there. That's the type of number Democrats want to make sure they can hold in Pennsylvania, not only in Pittsburgh, but also in Philadelphia. Let me open this up a little more as we get to Philadelphia and the suburbs. George, look, I don't want people to have a freak out here. 93%, that's obviously incredible, but there's only 9% of the vote in at this moment. Let me squeeze this down a little bit. We'll look at one of the suburb counties, the exurb counties around Philadelphia, where Democrats have to run up the score. Look, Joe Biden's doing good, but again, George, it's so early. There's nothing really to pull from.
Do we have anything from Erie County? And then I want to bring John in.
Yeah, Erie County, we have Donald Trump, barely won this. Just by a percentage point 4 years ago, but it was one of those swing counties that Obama won. And you can see right now, I mean, John, it's neck and neck, but 4% in. 4% in.
But I've got to say, if you go back to the Philly suburbs, Montgomery County, Delaware County, you see Biden with nearly an 80-point lead. It's 16% of the vote in. What's really important here, though, George, is, as I understand it, almost all of the vote that has been counted are people that voted today on Election Day. Pennsylvania didn't start counting
in those collar counties of Philadelphia.
Yes. This is day of voting, so they still have to count all of the mail-in vote. They didn't start opening the envelopes until today. That's going to take a long time. It's actually going to take several days. That mail-in vote is expected to really lean heavily towards Joe Biden. So I think it's interesting. It's still a small amount, no doubt, but I think that it's interesting already in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Those used to be swing areas. Now they're trending deep blue.
I mean, early indication, again, 17% of the expected vote in, but it's day of vote.
We have some exit polls for Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Pennsylvania, when you compare it to Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania actually in the exit polls showed Donald Trump's worst performance so far tonight when it comes to his approval rating. Let's dive in here and see what the exit polls show us. Again, these are preliminary, but the exit polls, as we mentioned earlier in the night, do reflect both, as John Carl was mentioning, people who voted today and those who were voting early in person. As you can see, let's try to refresh that and see if the job performance comes up. 52% disapproving of Donald Trump and his performance. Whether or not to contain the pandemic first or rebuild the economy, you can see overwhelmingly they say we've got to take care of this coronavirus in the U.S. And they say that Joe Biden is the best to handle that. When you look at the economy, Donald Trump and Joe Biden neck and neck in Pennsylvania. The most important issue in Pennsylvania, the economy, pandemic, they're behind. It's interesting. Let's look at independents in Pennsylvania. Joe Biden owning independents so far as the exit polls are concerned in Pennsylvania.
Chris Christie, neighboring state of yours in New Jersey, always going to be an uphill battle for the president, but essential.
Listen, vital, has to have it. And I do think, though, that the things that we're seeing still, I think this is very early, but there's underperformance in Philadelphia, even though those numbers don't indicate it. That's what I continue to hear. And so I think they're still feeling like they can turn out their day of vote in a way that's going to make it very close. No one's predicting a win there yet that I've heard, but no one's bemoaning a loss yet either.
Rahm Emanuel, the Biden campaign probably spent more time, energy, money, focus on Pennsylvania than any other state.
There's no doubt about it. And the vice president, if you remember in your town hall, when a guy stood up and was, oh, I know you, you're a sheriff. I mean, he's got to feel like a precinct captain or a county exec. They look at these numbers, and I would say there's a regional thing that's starting to happen. You look at the Ohio number, you look at Pennsylvania numbers, they're early, but there are trend lines where Joe Biden is outperforming in the suburbs, he's outperforming among working class, and he's also outperforming in the rural areas, even though you don't count it, just minimizing the losses is doing well. So he is doing really in those areas well. The vote total in the sense of how many people show up in the suburbs versus working industrial areas versus urban is going to be what's really interesting. Because I think the urban areas may not be performing to the kind of baseline of what people were expecting.
Yvette, are you seeing that across the country right now? The urban area is not performing as well.
That's not what we're seeing, and that's what I want to make sure I reserve comment until we see that. We're seeing a lot of, particularly in Ohio, Hamilton County, Cuyahoga County, Franklin County, huge turnout there. I mean, we're running not just on the presidential, but down ticket. We're winning all these races down ticket as well, and so I think we'll just have to wait and see. Some of those places, like Cuyahoga, for instance, people were still in line up until about a half an hour ago.
Those are
in
the watchwords for tonight. Wait and see. And we're going to be doing that with every state all night long. Sarah Fagan, the Trump campaign was hoping after that last debate where they thought that Joe Biden made a blunder by talking about ending fossil fuels and the issue of fracking. They thought that could give them headway in western Pennsylvania and coal country in these final 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think it probably will give him some headway. You know, whether he wins it or not, we'll see. I think Pennsylvania, to me, is the best case of the mirage, the red and blue mirage. We don't know whether these are early votes, whether these are absentee votes, whether they're day of votes yet. And so, you know, I would go back to something Nate Silver said, has been repeating over and over tonight.
Back to school. Should we go on vacation this summer? Those were all the discussions that they were having. And a lot of these moms telling me that, you know, previously in other elections, they weren't really that plugged in. They've maybe voted in a presidential election prior, but this year they thought it was very important to vote. George?
Eva Pilgrim, thanks very much. Let's go to Nate Silver before we go to break. Nate, let's take one more look at your magical I shouldn't call it magical, your very scientific forecast there. And what happens if Pennsylvania flips this year, went to Donald Trump 4 years ago, goes to Joe Biden this time around?
So again, I'm going to make things a bit more suspenseful. Give Donald Trump Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, but then if you give Biden Pennsylvania, it's going to show us the numbers going up. We'll see where it calculates here in a second. It's not quite the same as Ohio because it's a little bit of a more purple state, but you see Biden's up to 91% despite losing the South. If he wins back Pennsylvania, they'd have to hold the Wisconsin and Michigan.
So that's really interesting. It kind of brings you back to where you were at the beginning of the night.
It narrows the range, right? If Biden wins Pennsylvania, things are not going to fall apart from in the Midwest. He's also not going to have any type of landslide victory. But it would bring the probability back. It would mean that you have a close election where Biden is favored, but it's this kind of wide range of possible outcomes.
Chris?
Just heard from Republican leadership in Ohio that Trump has now pulled ahead in Ohio, and that they believe Trump will win between 1.5 and 2 points.
Right now, what we're seeing on our board right now is 64% of the expected vote in. Joe Biden just ahead by a little bit, but you're saying you're getting that from your sources right now inside Ohio. They're looking at the vote that they're still waiting on, and they believe, at least, we're not ready to say that, they believe that Donald Trump will win the state of Ohio. Have to take another quick break. We'll be right back.
These are real people.
Central Charlotte, Texas, Living County.
are back now. ABC News election headquarters in New York, coming up on 10 p.m. in the east. There you see the electoral map. Joe Biden has won 9 states, 89 electoral votes. Donald Trump has won 10 states and 72 electoral votes. All the big swing states still in play right now. Let's take a look now at the state of Georgia, one of the key battlegrounds at the end of this campaign. 16 electoral votes, 46% of the vote in right now, and Donald Trump has a fairly sizable lead right now. Tom Llamas, what more can we say about where Georgia is right now?
Look, we can't stop talking about Georgia yet because it's still very, very early. And the reason why I say that is because look at Atlanta right now. We're still waiting for a lot of the vote to come out of some of these huge counties where Democrats are going to run up the vote. Joe Biden's doing well in these counties around Atlanta where he needs to win. He's building off Hillary Clinton's lead that she had here. He's expanding the map even further. The problem for Joe Biden is that the red counties, President Trump's base, and this is something we're seeing throughout the country, at least in some of the big battleground states, President Trump's base is showing up and they're voting. And a lot of this, you see all the red around here, almost the same as 2016. The blue counties are the same. What we have to find out, what we have to figure out is what the count is at the end of the night in the Atlanta counties. If Joe Biden can run up the score there, he can tighten this up. But President Trump has got to be happy with this number at this hour right now. But again, a lot of the vote out in Atlanta.
Lindsay Davis, what are you seeing in Georgia?
You know, Georgia is 6th overall when it comes to the total number of coronavirus cases in our country. I think that one good image is that Governor Kemp today dropped off his ballot in a ballot drop box because he's quarantining because he came into contact with somebody who tested positive on Friday, though it's worth noting that he also did take a rapid test and is subsequently tested negative. But look, we're seeing the same thing that we saw in North Carolina, where the 3 counties that are hardest hit by coronavirus, all are counties that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. We'll remember that Governor Kemp was criticized for trying to open up Georgia early, and he then had that lawsuit against Keisha Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, when she implemented that mask mandate, which he later dropped. But what's interesting is, black voters make up 32% of the eligible voting population in Georgia, and a lot has been said tonight about the black voters not turning up, and I do think that it's relevant to talk about the disproportionate effect on black and brown communities. Of course, black people make up 13% of the population, but 20% of the COVID deaths, 1 out of 900 black people have died as a result of coronavirus.
Okay, Lindsay Davis, thanks very much. Let's take another look at the state of Texas right now. Not expected to be a battleground this year, but it is close right now with about 76% of the expected vote in. Donald Trump has about a 2-point lead over Joe Biden right now. Tom, what stands out?
What stands out for me, George, as I put Texas here in the middle of the map so we can see it a little bigger, absentee, basically neck and neck, George. Look at that right there. Democrats had to build a lead on the early vote, especially in a state like Texas, but Republicans showed up early as well, and they voted there in Texas. Look, a lot of red counties. Texas has been Republican for a very long time. Jimmy Carter was the last Democrat to win this state. Some things that are good for Democrats are around the Dallas County suburb areas, and we'll show you why. So Fort Worth, which is usually a Republican stronghold, let me clear this out here. Tarrant County, 49%. It's neck and neck. President Trump won this by almost 10 points 4 years ago. We go a little bit higher here to Denton County. It's the same story. President Trump underperforming there. But here's something that's interesting. In Houston, Harris County, the biggest county so far, it's essentially the same race as it was 4 years ago. Harris County, Houston, is an area where the Democrats have to run up the score even more if they have any chance of winning in Texas, because you go to one of these red counties, George, look at that, in East Texas, it's 3-1, and it's like that all across East Texas.
Matt Dowd is in Texas. Matt, it looks like John Cornyn is going to be returned as a Republican senator from Texas, but in the final days of his campaign, he started to break a little bit, uncharacteristically, from President Trump.
Well, I think he saw the numbers in Texas and the changing nature. He's catching up to the changing nature of the state of Texas, which, as we've talked about earlier, has gone from a solid red state to now, I think, a slightly red state. I think in the end, Biden's going to get really close in this state as I look at the numbers, very close, closer than any presidential candidate in 40-some-odd years, but I don't think he's going to have enough. It's those last 2 or 3 points that are really hard, but he'll get really close. The other thing I'm going to say is what's played out in Florida is not playing out in Texas, so I think I'd counsel everybody to not interpret one place as meaning it's going to affect another place. The Hispanic vote here went really well for Joe Biden, much better than Donald Trump did here last time among the Hispanic vote. So I just counsel everybody that one state, Florida, may be about Florida, but it may not necessarily be about others.
What are we seeing? Thank you, Matt, in the exit polls in Texas, David?
You know, similar to what Matt Dowd was saying, you know, some pretty decent exit polls for the president, though, who's looking at this, 55% approve. But to Matt's point on the Latino vote, which is significant, 59% went for Joe Biden, though I'll point out that Hillary Clinton had 61% 4 years ago. So Joe Biden still has some room to grow there if he's going to match her numbers.
Okay, coming up on 10 p.m. in the East, polls are going to close in 4 more states. We'll be right back.
Central Peak for 3 seconds. Central Baker 5.
Hot.
Just let me that wall for a second. We'll get something in the area. Second.
Clear.
Central Key 93.
Go ahead.
Copy a TX, please.
Go ahead.
517-499-0505. Trying to contact an Angela Winklepeck to believe relative to this female here. Leave a message or you can hold them, see if they're able to come help her out. Melanie Ellenwood.
Okay. Number 4, copy 1.
Good.
Turn injured deer, Moscow Road, just north of Carter Road. Complainant is in a maroon colored Silverado waiting. He wants the deer.
Welcome.
I will never apologize for love.
Were you talking to Dale before?
next president.
I'm the candidate of police officers, the middle class, law-abiding, hard-working American patriots, and others.
There will be no blue states or red states, just the United States. I'll work as hard for those who vote against me as those who voted for me, because that's what a president's supposed to do.
Live from New York City and across the country, Election Night 2020. Now reporting, Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Coming up on 10 p.m. in the East, and we have a long way to go on this Election Night 2020. That's where things stand right now. Joe Biden has won 9 states, 89 electoral votes. Donald Trump has won 10 states, 72 electoral votes, but all of the big battlegrounds are still out there right now. The polls have still just closed in 4 additional states. Let's take a look at that right now. State of Iowa, key state in the middle of the country, 6 electoral votes, key Senate race there as well. We cannot project a winner right there, but Kayna Whitworth is on the ground for us in Iowa tonight, where she's focused on the rural vote. Kayna.
Yeah, hey, George. So 75% of rural voters cast their ballot for Donald Trump in 2016. It was certainly the case here in Iowa. And this is a place where they are focused on the economy and job security. And 1 in 5 of those jobs is in agriculture. And some of those people are really hurting right now, particularly the farmers. Their crops were decimated by weather. First, they saw the drought and then the windstorm. They're battling COVID-19 and, of course, Trump's trade wars with China. Now, the federal government dumped $37 billion into aid to American farmers, but some that I spoke with here in Iowa simply said that's not enough. It doesn't make them whole, and their vote cannot be bought. One farmer in particular said he simply cannot overlook the lack of civility in the White House, and he cast his vote for Joe Biden. Now, it's important to note here that, of course, Donald Trump has a lot of support. He was made an honorary member of the Iowa Corn Growers Association, which is a big deal here. I also spoke with one farmer who said, finally, someone is standing up to China. He said, quite frankly, that is something that the Obama-Biden administration didn't do, and so he was happy to cast his vote, of course, for Donald Trump. And, George, as you mentioned, we have a really tight Senate race here. It is neck and neck. The Republican incumbent, Joni Ernst, pulling ahead in recent polls. She's trying to fend off her Democratic challenger, Theresa Greenfield. Now, some surprised that it's such a battle here for Joni Ernst. She's a rising star in the Republican Party, and Theresa Greenfield, relatively unknown. She describes herself as a businesswoman and a scrappy farm girl. But the Democrats, George, dumped $94 million into her campaign, trying to flip that seat.
Kayna Whitworth, thanks very much. The polls have also closed in 3 more states. Polls have closed in the state of Nevada. 6 electoral votes in play. A lot of early voting in that state, but we cannot project a winner yet. Polls have also closed in the state of Utah. Again, a vote-by-mail state, but we cannot call that yet. 6 electoral votes. And the polls have closed in the state of Montana. 3 electoral votes, key Senate race there as well, but not enough vote in to make a projection yet. So we want to take another look now at one of the key states in that so-called blue wall for the Democrats, the state of Michigan. Right now, 23% of the expected vote is in. And Donald Trump, it appears, Tom Yamas, has a huge lead right now.
Yeah, okay, so spoiler alert, it's a little funky right now in Michigan, okay? Let me show you why. The big reason, George, is because we don't have the early vote yet, okay? We don't have the early vote in yet, so we can't sort of work that into our numbers so far. But here's one reason why these numbers at this point don't make sense. Wayne County, you have Donald Trump on top, but there's only 3% of the vote in. Macomb County, which is one of those really key counties that President Trump won 4 years ago, the home of the Reagan Democrats, he's way up, but he's way up from where he was 4 years ago. So again, there's not enough vote in. We're going to be looking at places like Grand Rapids. This is Kent County, where President Trump won 4 years ago. But again, these are all areas that 2 years later, Gretchen Whitmer came in that blue wave, and she was able to turn those counties back to blue.
John Carl, of course, we saw all the polls leading up to the election day in Michigan. Joe Biden was leading consistently by anywhere from 5 to 10 points in that state. This could be one of those red mirage states.
Yeah, it's either the polling was way off, and a lot of pollsters should be fired, or we're seeing a bit of a red mirage here. And remember, in the state of Michigan, there's a lot of mail-in voting, and the state, in most of the state, they don't even open the ballots until today. In some jurisdictions, they started opening them yesterday. It takes time. It takes a long time. They had warned us that the vote in Michigan is likely to take well beyond tonight. So I would expect, as that mail-in vote is counting, that's Democratic vote, that margin, those numbers change pretty dramatically.
Let's take a look at the state of Michigan, of Wisconsin as well right now. Let's pull that up. 30% of the expected vote in. A little bit closer there, Tom. More of the vote has been counted, but Donald Trump is slightly ahead.
Yeah, slightly ahead. This is one of the states he won. You know, it was very close here, 23,000 votes. We're going to be talking about Milwaukee. This is so important. 15% of the total vote. Joe Biden is where he is, needs to be, but he got to bring that number up a little bit. We only have about 30% of the vote in, so he can catch up there. We're also going to be talking about the WOW counties. This is Waukesha, Ozaukee, and some of the others, Washington as well. In Waukesha, President Trump won 4 years ago. This is actually a pretty good lead for him at 60% in. He's holding what he had 4 years ago. That's exactly what he has to do. Still not enough vote in. You know, like some of these swing counties I can take a look at here. Price, a tiny county, Donald Trump on top, building on his lead there, but only 12%. So it's a little hard to sort of pull data out of here. In Green Bay, Brown County, you know, Donald Trump's sort of performing where he needs to be. But again, it's so little here. Kenosha, of course, we want to talk about as well because it had such a big role. We were talking about the social justice that swept across the country with the Jacob Blake shooting there. Donald Trump on top. He won this just barely 4 years ago. He has a big lead right now. But again, I just think that there still needs a lot of vote to come in.
While we're looking at the blue wall, let's pick up Pennsylvania again. Let's take a check back in and see where Pennsylvania is at this point. 23% of the expected vote in.
All right, we got a lot more vote in here, George. So let's take a look. We'll start with Scranton, Joe Biden's hometown, Lackawanna County. President Trump on top right there. He's going to like those numbers. Joe Biden is not. Just south of that, Lucerne. This is Wilkes-Barre, PA. Joe Biden behind again there. You know, he's doing better than Hillary Clinton. That's some good news. But President Trump still on top. And we got to talk about Philadelphia again. We're still waiting for a lot of the vote to come in here. Philadelphia, giant margins, but this is what John Carl was just talking about. George, we just don't have the vote in, only 9%. Those counties around, this is Bucks County, this is kind of one of Montgomery, excuse me. Let me see if we can find Bucks over here. Philadelphia, let's go over here. Yeah, Chester. Oh, we don't have Bucks yet. Chester's another big suburbs around the Philadelphia area. Joe Biden doing well there. So, I mean, look, George, 23%, and it's hard to kind of pull any kind of narratives at this point so early in the night. Pittsburgh, we'll look at this because this is where Joe Biden has to run up the score, and there he has at 80%. That's a great number for him, but only 15%. And George, it's tough at this hour.
It may be a little early to start to play out narratives, but Emmanuel, let's try to do a little bit. This is looking a little bit right now like a replay of 2016.
Well, I'm not sure. The problem we have is you have so much early voting, and every state is different of when they count that. And so we're looking at counties, and you can extrapolate. I mean, you look at how close Ohio is. It's basically 6% right now, better than it was in 2016. But you look at, I think it's still going to come down to Pennsylvania. I think this entire election is going to be basically still what everybody thought going into it. But if you look at where Joe Biden was performing in Ohio, Akron, Toledo, Hamilton County, Cuyahoga County, Franklin County, you can extrapolate that that's very good news for both Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. But again, each state counts their early votes. Some of them count before the day of the polls close. And then in Pennsylvania, they don't start counting them. They have still got 3 more days of ballots to come in. So it's going to be very hard, but you do have trend lines that show a performance about working class, older voters, suburban voters, college-educated voters.
But so far, we haven't seen, Chris Christie, any big surprises yet. We haven't called any of the battlegrounds at all, and this is going to take
It's going to take some time. But, George, I think what we know now tonight, after 10 o'clock, is that the predictions that this was going to be a big Biden win are done. And really what this is going to come down to now is a few states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Arizona. And, you know, everything I'm seeing, you know, we haven't called anything yet, but Republicans are very optimistic in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Iowa. And so it's really now...
And Ohio.
And Ohio. So you're really coming down to Pennsylvania, Arizona, and get Ohio to a place where everybody is comfortable. So no one was predicting that 24 hours ago. They were predicting 3 to 330 votes for electoral votes for Joe Biden.
As you're talking, I just got some news in my ear, and I want to pull up the state of Arizona because this is potentially big news right here from the state of Arizona. 70% of the expected vote is in from Arizona. There was so much early vote in that state. More than 90% of the 2016 vote came in before Election Day. And one of the things you see right there is that Donald Trump is now losing the 70% of the expected vote into Joe Biden, 55-44. Tommy Amos, let's take a dive.
Yeah, George, at this hour, this is a major story and a major development. Not all the vote is in right now, but Maricopa County, this is going to be 3/4 of the total vote in all of Arizona. Joe Biden is on top. 4 years ago, this was a county, let me show you, 4 years ago, this was a county that President Trump won. It was tight, but that Joe Biden has this lead right now is very encouraging news for Democrats. We're going to go to the Democratic stronghold now of Tucson, Pima County. This is where... Look at this number, George. I mean, these are the kind of numbers that Joe Biden would want in some of those other battleground states with 80% of the vote in. I'm going to go to this county right here, Yuma. President Trump barely won this. This is a border county. You have conservative agricultural families, but you also have the Latino vote there as well. President Trump looks like he's doing well. He's building on the lead he had 4 years ago. But again, Maricopa County, and Maricopa really, it's a reflection of America. You have big cities like Phoenix. You have medium-sized cities like Scottsdale, agricultural. You have the universities, the tourist areas. Joe Biden's looking at this number right now. And it's going to make him very happy.
David Muir, what do the exit polls say about Arizona?
A couple of things coming out of Arizona right now that are really interesting. First of all, independents outnumber Democrats and Republicans in that state. So let's go right to that. 52% of independents, according to the exit polls, are going with Joe Biden. And when you go down some of these numbers, President Trump's job performance, 53% disapprove of his handling of the jobs. President, the opinion of Trump, 54% have an unfavorable view, so underwater, and more so than many of the states we've looked at so far. Look at Joe Biden, 50% favorable. And when you start getting into some of these key areas, COVID, Joe Biden has the edge in handling COVID. The economy, though, is Donald Trump's strength, it appears, in Arizona, at least according to the exit polls. Got a 3-point lead there, but still very close. One more key area, George, Hispanic and Latino vote. Joe Biden with 63% of the Latino vote tonight in Arizona.
According to the exit polls. John Carl, we know there are national trends at play here, but Arizona has been a deep red state. Yep. But as what Tip O'Neill used to say, all politics is local as well. John McCain, the late Senator John McCain, a target of Donald Trump for years. Cindy McCain endorsed Joe Biden. Jeff Flake, former senator from Arizona, Republican conservative, endorsed Joe Biden.
They both endorsed Cindy McCain, spoke at the Democratic convention, and those attacks on John McCain were relentless. He resisted taking the flag down to half staff when McCain died. None of that played well in Arizona. But I do want to have a note of caution on Arizona. Arizona is the reverse of what I was saying about Pennsylvania and Michigan. Arizona is where they're counting. They've been counting the early vote for weeks. So as the day-in vote comes in, I expect Arizona to get a lot closer. And I think Governor Christie made an important point here. This is going to be a long night, and we're going to
be a long week.
It could be a long week. We're going to need patience. I don't see Joe Biden running away with any of those states in the Sun Belt. We'll see what happens in Arizona. But we're going to be waiting on Pennsylvania. We may be waiting on Michigan and Wisconsin as well.
George,
go ahead.
One interesting thing from Michigan Republican leadership that just came in the Senate race, in the vote by mail that's been counted so far, and it's about 25% overall counted. Senator Peters is winning by about 20 points in the vote by mail. But on the election day voting, John James is winning by 22 points. So what they're looking at least in the first 25% of the vote, is that it's going to be a very close Senate race in Michigan. We don't know yet what will happen, but there's not a blowout there, and it's doing exactly what John was talking about in Arizona. You know, it's splitting very heavy Democrat on the vote by mail, but very heavy Republican, 22 points on voting today.
The Arizona, I just got a report from the Biden campaign, the Arizona vote by mail is outperforming their ex-model by 70,000 votes. They expected 150,000 margin. They got a 220,000 margin.
Okay, let's go to Nate Silver then and take a look at, Nate, let's look at your forecast and show what happens if the state of Arizona, red in 2016, goes to blue in 2020.
And again, we're going to give Trump Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, where he's probably the favorite at this point. But again, if Biden wins Arizona, then he's going to shoot up to, I think, around 70-some% here. It's not as important for him as Pennsylvania. It's not a Midwestern state. Actually, more than that, 75%. But, you know, Trump has to hit, like I said, all his marks, and Arizona is one where he would much prefer to have won.
Okay, Nate Silver, thanks very much. Coming up on 10:15 here in the East, we have to take another quick break. We'll be right back. back here at ABC News Election Headquarters in New York around 10:18 Eastern Time. And we want to take another look at the state of Ohio right now. 72% of the vote is in right now. And Tom Llamas, Donald Trump has pulled ahead now of Joe Biden in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, George, we're going to need a neck brace for Ohio. I told you earlier in the night it was looking like 2012, the map. Now it's looking like back to 2016. Donald Trump has gained control of Ohio. He's swung back a lot of those counties that were looking blue, places like Wood, Ohio, this county just south of Toledo there. You can see Donald Trump on top. He's actually doing a little bit better. But the big question is the 3 C's, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. This is where Democrats are going to have to run up the vote. All the votes not in Cuyahoga County yet, and Joe Biden is doing really well there. He's overperforming. It's a similar story in Columbus. 66% of the vote is in, but he's up 10 points from where Hillary Clinton was. And Cincinnati, Hamilton County, this used to be Republican stomping grounds. It switched over with Obama, and tonight Joe Biden has a very significant lead there. George, the story is this. He's going to have to run up the vote in the big cities. The rural counties are sticking with Donald Trump tonight.
Well, that seems to be the question, that the margins are good in the cities for Joe Biden, but are enough voters coming out for him?
We've seen significant turnout in the 3 C's. I mean, not just early vote, but on Election Day. I mean, they were predicting at about 2 o'clock in Hamilton County, we were at 60% of our total registration number, which is a really, really, really big deal. And they were projecting to beat 70% of our total registration number, which doesn't happen all the time. I think the big thing is these urban centers, they're counted slower. That's where most of the votes are, and they'll come in later. And I think they will make the difference, particularly because he's overperforming Hillary Clinton by so much, which means that the
Go ahead.
Can you show me heading to Tate's for follow-up?
Clear. Michael, your status?
We are okay.
Clear.
Baker 3, copy file. Last of Brown, first up, Tyorl, Tyorle. Black male 2981. Yeah, now you're back in.
Clear. Baker 3. Clear.